If I had known that a simple piece of furniture could detonate my entire life, I never would have set foot in that house. There are moments that split your world into a before and an after, and mine was a massive dark gray sofa. Before I even get into the mess I made, you have to promise not to judge me too harshly. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because this story is about to get complicated. It all started when my sister and her husband, Julian, bought their dream home. I was there to help, of course, the ever loyal sister. My sister was upstairs, blissfully unaware, probably organizing her spice rack in alphabetical order while I stood awkwardly in their new living room. The air was thick with the smell of fresh paint and possibility. And then he walked in, Julian. He didn't say a word at first, just leaned against the doorframe, and the entire atmosphere shifted. It became heavy, charged. His dark eyes bypassed the mess of boxes and scanned right over me, but it wasn't a casual glance. It was a look that pinned me in place, a silent acknowledgement of this thing that had been simmering between us for years. He saw right through the helpful sister act. He saw me. A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "Come on, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low hum that vibrated straight through my bones. "Try it out. I need an honest opinion." He gestured to the new couch, and I just knew, this wasn't about the furniture. This was the beginning of the end. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell, the kind you secretly invite into your life. We were all spending so much time at the new house, helping them settle in. It meant dinners together, unpacking boxes together, and me, trying to breathe in a house where the air was thick with his presence. My sister, bless her heart, was in her own little bubble of domestic bliss, talking about paint swatches and garden gnomes, completely oblivious to the silent, high-stakes tennis match happening right across her dinner table. Julian and I never spoke about it, but we didn't have to. It was in the way his leg would be just a little too close to mine under the table, a constant low-grade hum of electricity that I was terrified my sister would somehow feel. It was in the way I'd ask him to pass the salt, and his fingers would deliberately, slowly, brush against mine. The first time it happened, a jolt, sharp and hot, shot up my arm, and my breath hitched. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned, but when I dared to look up, his eyes were on me, dark and unreadable, with just the faintest hint of a smirk. He knew. He knew exactly what that touch did to me. The worst was when I'd catch him watching me. I'd be laughing at one of my sister's silly jokes or helping her in the kitchen, and I'd feel it, that prickle on the back of my neck. I'd turn, and he'd be leaning against a doorway, just watching. His gaze wasn't just looking, it was consuming. It was a physical weight that pinned me, stripped me bare of the good sister facade, and saw the part of me that was trembling with a terrible, exhilarating desire. Every stolen glance was a betrayal, a tiny little crack in the foundation of my sister's perfect life, and every second of it felt more real than anything else I had. The breaking point came one Thursday night. My sister was on a long call with our mom, her voice a cheerful, distant murmur from the upstairs office. I was in the living room, supposedly folding a basket of laundry, but really I was just staring at that monstrous gray couch, the scene of the crime where my self-control had first begun to crumble. He found me there, walking into the room so silently I didn't notice until he was standing just a few feet away. The air immediately became heavy again, charged with everything we hadn't said. "You never did give me your honest opinion," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I kept my eyes on the laundry, my hands suddenly clumsy. "About what? The house is beautiful, Julian." I could feel him move closer, closing the space between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "That's not what I asked," he whispered, his voice now right beside my ear. "The couch, Alara. I asked if you were comfortable." My blood ran cold and hot at the same time. This was it. This was the moment it moved from my imagination into the real world. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. It's fine. It's a very nice couch." He let out a soft, humorless laugh. "No, it's not." He took one more step, and his body was now just barely brushing against my side. He leaned in, his lips so close to my ear I could feel his breath. There's nothing comfortable about this, is there? His knuckles brushed against my arm as he spoke, a touch so light it was barely there, but it burned a brand on my skin. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a confession, and in that moment, I knew the game was over and something far more dangerous was about to begin. My body went rigid. His words hung in the air between us, a truth so sharp and dangerous it felt like it could physically cut me. Before I could even form a reply, a denial, anything, my sister's voice chirped from the top of the stairs, shattering the spell. Oh, shoot! I completely forgot the cream cheese for the frosting. She clattered down the steps, pulling on a jacket, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just walked into a room so thick with tension it was barely breathable. I'm just going to run to the store. It'll only take 20 minutes. Don't let him talk you into rearranging the furniture again, Alara. She laughed, blew a kiss in our general direction, and then the front door clicked shut behind her, leaving us in a silence that was 1,000 times heavier than before. The sound of her car starting and fading into the distance was like the timer on a bomb being set. At that exact moment, a soft patter began against the window pane, quickly growing into a steady, isolating rain. We were alone, trapped in this house, in this moment. I tried to move, to put the laundry basket between us, to create any kind of barrier, but he was faster. His hand shot out, not grabbing me, but gently closing around my wrist. His touch was electric, a low-voltage current that paralyzed me instantly. Don't, he whispered, his voice rough. I couldn't look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on a meaningless spot on the wall behind him. Julian, we can't. Please, don't do this. My voice was a pathetic, trembling thing. It had none of the conviction I was screaming inside my own head. This is my sister, your wife. This is the ultimate betrayal. But my body wasn't listening. It was leaning into his touch, craving it. Don't do what? He challenged softly, his thumb beginning to draw slow, mesmerizing circles over the frantic pulse point on my wrist. Don't acknowledge what's been happening between us since the day we met? Don't admit that every time we're in the same room, it feels like the air is on fire? He took a step closer, using his hold on my wrist to gently pull me away from the safety of the laundry basket. I was forced to face him. My breath hitched when I finally met his eyes. All the pretense was gone. There was no smirk, no game. There was only a raw, desperate hunger that I knew was mirrored in my own gaze. She's my sister, I breathed, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. It was my last line of defense, and we both knew how weak it was. I know, he murmured, his other hand coming up to cup my jaw, his fingers tangling in the hair near my ear. His touch was impossibly gentle. And I've been fighting this for years, Alara, but I'm done fighting. He leaned in, and the world just dissolved. The sound of the rain, the ticking clock on the wall, the guilt clawing at my insides, it all faded into a dull roar. All that existed was the heat of his palm on my skin, the scent of his cologne mixed with something that was uniquely him, and the few inches of air separating our mouths. My eyes fluttered shut, my head tilted back in a silent, final surrender. I could feel his breath, warm and shaky, ghosting across my lips. This was it. The fall, the point of no return, just a single millimeter away. His mouth crashed onto mine, not with tenderness, but with the desperate, raw hunger of a man who had been starving for years. It wasn't a kiss, it was a confession, a surrender, a demolition. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me to stop, to push him away, to run upstairs and lock myself in the guest room, but my body had already mutinied. My hands, which should have been shoving his chest, were instead tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, demanding more. A low groan escaped my throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated need that I didn't recognize as my own. We stumbled backward, a clumsy, frantic dance of desperation, until the backs of my knees hit the edge of that monstrous gray couch. And then I was falling, sinking into the cushions that had started it all, pulling him down with me. The world outside ceased to exist. The rain drumming against the glass was a distant, irrelevant soundtrack to our own private storm. His hands were everywhere, mapping the lines of my body through my dress with an urgency that left me breathless. This wasn't love, it was combustion. Years of stolen glances, of accidental touches that lingered too long, of words left unsaid, were all being cashed in at once, in this single, cataclysmic moment. I felt the cool fabric of the couch against my back as he shifted his weight over me, his eyes, dark and blazing, locked on mine. There was no going back. I was sinking, not just into the sofa, but into him, into this catastrophic betrayal. And the most terrifying part was that I didn't want to be saved. In that moment, with his lips searing a path down my neck, and the whole world narrowed to the scent of his skin and the weight of his body, I finally felt comfortable. The first thing that pierced the hazy, breathless afterglow wasn't a sound, but a light. A pair of headlights swept across the living room wall, a silent, damning announcement. My sister was home. A jolt of pure, ice-cold adrenaline shot through me, instantly extinguishing the fire. We untangled ourselves in a frantic, silent ballet of shame. I scrambled off the couch, my limbs feeling clumsy and foreign, yanking at the hem of my dress, trying to smooth out wrinkles that felt like neon signs advertising my guilt. Julian stood up, running a hand through his now disheveled hair, his back to me. The air, which moments ago had been electric with passion, was now thick with the metallic tang of fear. The click of the key in the front door lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My sister breezed in, shaking a few raindrops from her jacket, a grocery bag in her hand, and a cheerful smile on her face. "I got the last one. Can you believe it?" she chirped, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just walked into the wreckage of her own life. I couldn't speak. My throat was a tight, aching knot. I stared at a random spot on the floor, convinced that my guilt was a visible aura around me, that she could smell his scent on my skin. My eyes darted to the gray couch. It wasn't just furniture anymore. It was a witness, a tombstone for my integrity. My sister chattered on about her near miss with the cream cheese as she puttered into the kitchen. Julian still hadn't turned around. Then, as she was turned away, he finally looked at me over his shoulder. His face was pale, his expression unreadable, but his eyes held mine for one long, suffocating second. It wasn't a look of passion anymore. It was something else, a shared sentence, a silent, damning confirmation. We did this, and now we have to live with it. After that night, I swore to myself it was a one-time thing, a catastrophic, life-altering mistake that would never, ever be repeated. I spent the next 48 hours in a self-imposed quarantine of guilt, replaying my sister's cheerful, oblivious face over and over in my mind. I avoided Julian's texts. I made excuses not to go over to the house. I was going to starve this thing between us until it shriveled up and died from neglect. That was the plan. A good, solid, sensible plan. But a plan is no match for an addiction, and I was quickly learning that Julian was a drug I had only just tasted. The dam broke during a Sunday lunch. It was all so painfully normal on the surface. My sister was talking about planting a rose bush. My dad was telling a bad joke, and I was pushing mashed potatoes around my plate, my stomach in a tight, anxious knot. Julian was sitting across from me, playing the part of the perfect husband, but every time I risked a glance, his eyes were on me. There was no hunger in them, not here. It was something quieter, a steady, knowing gaze that said, "You can't run." The moment came when my sister asked me to grab the extra pitcher of iced tea from the garage fridge. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew he would follow. It was inevitable. The air in the garage was cool and smelled of gasoline and fresh-cut grass. I had my hand on the cold metal handle of the fridge when the door from the kitchen clicked shut behind me. I didn't have to turn around. I felt his presence like a change in air pressure. "Stop avoiding me, Alara," he said, his voice low and calm. I kept my back to him, my knuckles white as I gripped the handle. "There's nothing to talk about. It was a mistake." I felt him move closer until his chest was just inches from my back. "Was it?" he murmured, his breath stirring the hair on my neck. And just like that, my resolve shattered into a million pieces. He didn't even have to touch me. The proximity was enough. My body betrayed me, leaning back into his heat almost imperceptibly. He took that as his invitation. His hands came up to rest on my hips, a firm, possessive gesture that sent a jolt of fire straight through me. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening to the muffled sounds of our family laughing on the other side of the door. The sheer, insane risk of it was intoxicating. The adrenaline was a roar in my ears, drowning out the last dying whispers of my conscience. He spun me around slowly, and his mouth found mine again, not with the frantic desperation of the first time, but with a slow, deliberate certainty that was somehow even more devastating. This wasn't a mistake anymore. This was a decision, a secret we were now building together, right under the noses of everyone we were supposed to love. From that day on, we lived a double life, existing in the stolen seconds and hidden spaces. The game became about how much we could get away with. It was a terrifying, exhilarating tightrope walk. A simple trip to the grocery store became an opportunity for a rendezvous in a deserted aisle, our hands brushing as we both reached for the same box of cereal, a jolt of electricity passing between us while my sister was just feet away, comparing labels on canned tomatoes. We developed a silent language of glances and tiny gestures, a whole conversation happening in a crowded room that no one else could hear. He'd tap his glass twice, and it meant, "Meet me on the patio." I'd tuck my hair behind my left ear, and it meant, "Not now, it's too risky." We were becoming experts in deception, and a dark, twisted part of me was proud of how good we were at it. But the better we got, the bolder we became. The recklessness started to creep in, fueled by the arrogance of not getting caught. The biggest risk came one evening when my sister went to bed early with a migraine. Julian and I were on that gray couch, watching a movie, the volume turned down low. The temptation was too much. The memory of our first kiss on those cushions was a ghost between us. One thing led to another, and soon the movie was forgotten, our whispers and soft sounds filling the quiet house. We were lost in it, completely wrapped up in each other, when we heard the creak of a floorboard from upstairs. We froze. Then my sister's voice, groggy and close, called out, "Julian, can you bring me a glass of water?" Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me. We flew apart. I grabbed a throw pillow to clutch to my chest. My dress was slightly twisted, my hair a mess. Julian stood up, trying to look casual as he smoothed his shirt. "Coming, honey," he called back, his voice miraculously steady. He walked to the kitchen, and I sat there, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, listening to the sound of the faucet running, then his footsteps on the stairs. He was gone for 2 minutes, that felt like 2 years. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her eyes were wild, her lips swollen, her face flushed with a mixture of passion and pure terror. Who was this person? This woman who would risk her sister's entire world for a stolen moment on a couch. I was trapped in a labyrinth of my own making, and the horrifying truth was, even after a near miss that should have scared me straight, I wasn't looking for the way out. I was just wondering when we could do it again. The illusion of control is a funny thing. You think you're driving, that you have your hands firmly on the wheel, but you're just a passenger hurtling toward a cliff you refuse to see. My moment of clarity, the horrifying instant I saw the cliff's edge, came on a Tuesday night. It was disgustingly domestic. My sister, Chloe, was curled up on the armchair opposite the gray couch, our stage, a steaming mug of chamomile tea in her hands. She was wearing a pair of Julian's old, worn-out sweatpants, and her hair was in a messy bun. She looked so soft, so content, so completely breakable. I was on the couch, of course, a book open on my lap that I hadn't read a single word of for the past hour. Julian was in the kitchen, the sound of him loading the dishwasher a steady, rhythmic backdrop to the impending disaster. And then Chloe sighed, a happy, dreamy sound. "You know," she said, her eyes getting a little misty, "I was thinking today about the guest room." I froze, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. Did she know? Had she found something? A text? A stray piece of clothing? But then she continued, oblivious. Once we, you know, once we have a baby, it'll be the nursery. But I was thinking, we could put a daybed in there too. For you. So you can stay over all the time and be the cool aunt who spoils them rotten. She smiled at me, a smile so pure and full of love it felt like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The air was being sucked out of the room. A baby, a future, a life that they were building, brick by loving brick, and I was standing outside with a sledgehammer. She started talking about names, about how she knew Julian would be the most amazing father, how lucky she was to have him, to have me. Every word was a nail in my coffin. I felt like a monster wearing my own skin. I looked down at the couch cushion beneath me, at the fabric that had witnessed my complete moral collapse, and I felt a wave of nausea so profound I thought I was going to be sick right there. This wasn't a thrilling, dangerous game anymore. This was a demolition. I was systematically dismantling the heart of the one person in the world who had only ever shown me kindness. The weight of it, the sheer suffocating mass of our secret, crashed down on me all at once. It was unsustainable. It was a poison. And it was killing all of us, even if only I knew it. I found him in the garage a few minutes later, after making a flimsy excuse about needing to grab a blanket from my car. The garage door was closed, trapping us in the dim light and the smell of oil and sawdust. He was leaning against his workbench, wiping his hands on a rag, and he looked up as I closed the door behind me, the click echoing in the sudden silence. He smiled that slow, dangerous smile, the one that used to make my stomach flip with excitement, but now just made it clench with dread. Couldn't stay away, he murmured. The words, meant to be seductive, landed like stones. We have to stop, I said, my voice coming out as a harsh, ragged whisper. His smile vanished. He straightened up, his expression hardening. What are you talking about? I took a step closer, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. This, Julian, us, what we're doing, it's going to destroy her. He let out a short, humorless laugh. A little late for that, don't you think? I flinched as if he'd slapped me. No, not yet. She doesn't know. We can still stop this before it goes any further. He crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, stopping just inches from me, forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. His eyes were dark, intense, searching mine for a weakness he knew was there. And what if I don't want to stop? He challenged, his voice a low growl. What if this is the only thing that's felt real to me in years? Do you want to stop, Alara? Can you look at me and honestly say you want to go back to the way things were before? My throat closed up, because the honest answer was no. I didn't want to go back. I was addicted to the fire, to the adrenaline, to him. But Chloe's trusting, smiling face was burned into the back of my eyelids. She's talking about having a baby, I whispered, the words tasting like acid. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just the inconvenience of reality. He reached out, his hand cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. Then we'll figure it out, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. We both knew it was a lie. There was nothing to figure out. There were no good options. There was only the truth, waiting like a primed bomb. There's nothing to figure out, I choked out, pulling away from his touch. There's only her, and there's us, and we don't get to have both. The silence that followed was heavier than any words we could have spoken. We just stood there, on opposite sides of a line we had already crossed 100 times, finally understanding that there was no path forward that didn't end in scorched earth. The passion was still there, a low hum of electricity in the air between us, but it was tangled with something new and terrifying, the absolute certainty of the end. The bomb was going to go off. We were just standing in the wreckage, waiting for the explosion. So now I'm just here, stuck. I'm living in this bizarre, silent limbo, suspended between the life I'm supposed to want and the one I'm terrified to admit I'd burn the world down for. My phone is a torture device. It buzzes with a picture from my sister, Chloe, of a paint swatch for the nursery, a soft, hopeful yellow. Then, a minute later, it buzzes again with a text from Julian. I can't do this without you. Say the word and we're gone. My heart splits in two, a clean, agonizing break every single time. Every path forward feels like a different kind of death. Do I confess? Do I sit my sister down on that gray couch, the altar of our betrayal, and tell her that her husband and her sister have destroyed the foundation of her entire world? The thought of her face, of her innocent, trusting eyes crumbling into dust, makes me physically ill. Or do I do what he wants? Do I pack a bag, get in a car, and just leave everything behind for a life built on a lie, fueled by a passion that feels more real than oxygen? A life where I could wake up next to him every morning, but I could never look at myself in the mirror again. There's a third option, the one my conscience screams at me to take: disappear alone, change my number, move to a new city, and cut them both out of my life forever.